This is David Hayder. I'm a consultant ophthalmologist and Chief Clinical Information Officer at Bolton NHS Foundation Trust. This presentation introduces the Ophthalmic Device Maturity Score, which is a tool that can be used hopefully to help drive up the standard of ophthalmic imaging device connectivity and deployment in units across the UK. I'm going to start by showing a standard that trusts can aim for, at least for the time being, in terms of their digital connectivity. So let's start with a group of imaging devices as shown, the ideal being the data from all these devices going into a single ophthalmic PACS product, demonstrated by this icon here. Now, in reality, if a unit has OCT devices by multiple manufacturers, there may need to be more than one ophthalmic PACS product present. So, in addition to the PACS product, there'd then ideally be an ophthalmic EPR, such as OpenEyes displayed or Medisoft. And some of the data from the ophthalmic PACS, biometry for instance, would also be sent to the ophthalmic EPR. An integration with the National Ophthalmic Database to allow surgical outputs to go there would be key for national audit, and then also an integration potentially with community optometric software to bring surgical data back into the ophthalmic EPR. And then going a step further, looking at an integration between the ophthalmic EPR and the Trust's generic EPR. So allergies, for instance, added into one system automatically propagate to the other, and the same could be the case with diagnoses, prescriptions and the like. But for the rest of this presentation, I'm going to concentrate on the connectivity of the ophthalmic imaging devices, and that's where the ophthalmic device maturity score comes in. So what are the problems that the ODMS seeks to address? Well, many units have poorly connected imaging devices, and staff often don't have a picture of what an ideal deployment would look like, and that can make it difficult to articulate the problems they face in the connectivity of these systems. And then that can have a knock-on effect in convincing stakeholders that funding is required to improve the quality of the networking and deployment. The ODMS provides a clear scoring system to help describe the current state of the ophthalmic imaging devices in a trust or department. So the maturity score is given as a number from 1 to 4 and a letter from A to C. So at the least mature end of the spectrum, a score would be 1A, and at the most mature it would be 4C. The numeric value represents the connectivity score, so how well the device is connected to the network, and the letter represents the safety score, or how well backed up the data is. This graphic in an A4 sheet is available that goes into a little bit more detail about what the numbers and the letters mean, but it will probably be a little clearer if I go through a few key examples. So we start at the lower end of the scale at a 1A. So these devices are connected to nothing but power. So there's no network connection, there's no backup, and they are standalone. Clinicians access the data from these devices either on the devices themselves or via printouts. And other than being relatively low cost to install compared to other levels of deployment, there's little else in terms of advantage. They're inefficient in the use of the scanners. The clinician workflow is poor because the clinicians can't view the results on their computers in their consulting rooms. If the machines are switched off or fail, data isn't necessarily available if the output hasn't been printed. It also makes virtual clinics very impractical because the data can't be easily collated between multiple devices. And because the data is input manually, i.e. technicians will type patients' names into the scanners themselves, you end up with duplicates on all the machines. So 1B is minimally better. Changing from an A to a B is just a reflection of the fact that at least the data is backed up to some degree now in terms of local backup. So that might be CDs or DVDs or external hard drives connected, say weekly, to the device just to take data backup. And several trusts have this type of deployment. Other than having some data backup, there's no real advantages over 1A. So 2B now, so moving from 1 to 2 is because the devices are no longer isolated. They're on a network and the results can be viewed on computers in the consulting rooms. But the results that are viewed are served from the devices themselves. So the cameras and scanners are acting as servers. So if the cameras and scanners are turned off, the images can't be viewed on the computers. So this is an improvement for sure, along with some backup, but it still means if the devices are switched off, the data can't be viewed. It can mean a piece of software for almost any device on the network. Virtual clinics are still very difficult because the data is not always available. And again, you've got manual patient entry into the devices, so there's duplicates. So things improve significantly by a 3C level. The 3 represents the fact that the devices are no longer servers themselves. They just capture the data and pass them through to dedicated network servers. So on the diagram you can see on the left there's a Zeiss networked server and on the right a Heidelberg server. And it's those that send the images onto the consulting room computers. So the scanners and cameras are dedicated to capturing, which they then do more efficiently because they're not acting as servers. And the experience on the PCs in the consulting rooms is better because they're being fed data from dedicated servers, so the software tends to be more responsive. As you can see on the right, the advantages now significantly weigh the disadvantage. Obviously backup is still ideal now because the data is on the servers, and an assumption here is that IT are backing up those servers. The user experience tends to be good, as I've already mentioned, and this is a good environment in which to carry out virtual clinics, though the concern can be because the data is still entered manually on the devices, you can end up with a lot of duplicates in the system for one patient, and that can make virtual clinics difficult because if you're launching your PACS product from your Ophthalmic EPR, your PACS product may not surface all the data available if it can't tell which data is from which patient because the data's all been entered manually. And that's the one shortfall of the 3C level of deployment, which is addressed by the 4C that I'll talk about next. So the other end of the spectrum is 4C, which is the most mature level of deployment. So this has all the advantages of the previous 3C level. The extra step of the introduction of DICOM modality work lists, or DICOM MWL, is that manual patient data entry is removed. So when patients are scanned, the technicians who are performing the imaging can just pick the patient off a list. And I'll go through the diagram shown in a bit more detail in a separate slide now. So here's the same devices on the previous slide, but just expanded, and I'll go through how it would typically work. So up in the top left-hand corner here, you've got the hospital PAS, or Patient Administration System. And when a patient arrives in a unit, the front desk staff or a kiosk typically check the patient into the PAS, and that can easily be configured to automatically inform the primary ophthalmic server. In this case, I've illustrated it as Zeiss Forum, but it can be any of the common ophthalmic PACS products. That primary ophthalmic PACS then uses the technology called DICOM modality work lists to inform all the devices that it's networked to that that particular patient has arrived, and it passes the patient details to the cameras and scanners. So when a technician takes a patient to one of those devices, that patient's name will already be on the work list for the day, so that patient just needs to be picked off a list and no patient data needs to be manually inputted. Once the scan is complete and save or export is selected, the data gets then sent back to the primary ophthalmic packs. Or in the case of this image, these 5 devices send their data to the primary packs, but the Spectralis data is sent to Heidelberg Eye Explorer. And that's just a reflection of the fact that Zeiss OCT devices can be interrogated to the highest standard with Zeiss software, and Heidelberg Spectralis OCT scanners, their data is best viewed on Heidelberg Eye Explorer. And the same is true of Topcon OCT scanners, where the best progression data comes from viewing the OCT results on Topcon ImageNet. Now, it is possible to have some degree of viewing of different manufacturers' OCT data on different software, but in my experience, the quality is lacking and a lot of the key analytic and progression features are lost. So the choice of an ophthalmic PACS, or certainly a primary ophthalmic PACS that you send as much data as possible to, is usually determined by the manufacturer or the predominant manufacturer of OCT devices on the network. Other devices are more forgiving. Certainly fundus cameras, their output can be viewed easily on any of the ophthalmic PACSes, but it's the OCT devices that cause most difficulty. And back to this diagram, the Zeiss server and the Heidelberg server then make their data available via icons to launch the software on the clinician computers. Here's an example of the District General Hospital that I work in. So we have a range of cameras, scanners and field machines. And as you can see, most of them have been networked up to the 4C, so the highest level of maturity. There's a few at the bottom, an old anterior segment camera, a B-scan and an old aberrometer that currently are isolated, and our intention is to rectify those shortfalls or remove them from active use this year. But you can see it's very possible to get a wide range of devices up to a very good level of connectivity and maturity. This is how the ophthalmic device maturity score looks. So there's a sheet that gives the scoring criteria, and there's also a downloadable spreadsheet where staff in a unit can select the type of device, its level of maturity, and then they can easily be averaged out and shown as graphs by the spreadsheet. And the hope is that articulating the current state of maturity of the devices can help investment and bringing the quality of deployment up to a much higher level. Because without that level of maturity, it's very difficult to deploy very efficient virtual clinics, for example. Other aspects that can help improve this maturity and maintain it are consideration of an IT manager within the eye unit, having potentially that same person scrutinise all new device purchases. So it's not just about getting the historical data and the existing devices on the network. Every new device also needs to be thought out. Does it have the right number of DICOM devices when it's purchased? Is it as compatible as possible with the primary ophthalmic PACS that's been selected? And someone that understands this, it's useful to have them as the arbiter of what's purchased or what's discussed further. And formally selecting a primary ophthalmic PACS system is helpful as well. So the first question is, would this new device work well with the primary ophthalmic PACS that we've selected? And as I said before, the choice of primary PACS will likely depend on the manufacturer of the main OCT technology in use in a unit. Thanks very much for listening. I'm obviously not here to take any questions, but they can be relayed to me and I can address them by email, or Glyn, who's present, may be able to take questions as well. Thank you.